Oh, Vinhos.
Did I just blow your mind because you're not talking?
I think I kind of missed some of it. Some of the stuff you guys say is so good about it, I think I just didn't get.
Yeah, well, I think that's largely a function of playing with the new 2016 edition rules. The new deluxe game actually comes with 2 rule sets. It comes with the original, I think, 2010 rules, which is what, originally shipped with the game. It's the game that we've all played, that we all fell in love with, and the game that made us want a deluxe edition of this game. But within that, there was a lot of pushback on some of it, because the original game was really a little bit obtuse. It's super complicated. The board was super busy. And it was really hard for a lot of people to track on it. So these 2016 rules were an attempt to kind of make it a more traditional Euro. So that was the edition that we played, your first exposure to it. And I think the fact that it's been streamlined so much, while it's still a good game, it robbed it a little bit of those little quirks that made it such a unique game that we all fell in love with.
Did it feel like an express version to you, or did it just feel like it was almost sanitized?
No, it's not. It's not even expressed. The game. Honestly, the game isn't any easier. It's sort of like, how do I put this? It's the same but different. And I know that doesn't make any sense on the face of it, but I don't feel the depth. It wasn't shallower by any stretch. The game was just as hard. The cash was just as tight. The decisions were just as hard. But I think what happened, it's not that it was sanitized. It's that it was kind of, what's the word? It was kind of conformed, I guess would be a better word. That the new edition of Vinhos feels like 100 other Euros. It is buy some property, generate some goods, convert those goods into something else, sell them, collect the money, do it 6 times, game's over. And I think while it works and while all those decisions are there and everything the original game did, this one does too. But in order to make it more accessible, more comfortable to people who play a lot of Euros, what was lost was those rough edges, those kind of clunky things that were in the original that were, quite frankly, a little bit of a frustration point, even for people who like the game. When you take those away, suddenly all the character has been removed from the game. And I think that is the big disconnect. There's also a little bit of a, for lack of a better word, I don't want to say this, the arc has changed. In the original game is very agricola. You start almost as a subsistence vineyard. And, you start the game almost flat broke. You spend every penny you have buying your first field. You kind of squirt out a terrible wine. You sell it to anyone who will buy it, and you take that little tiny bit of capital and you invest it back in your winery. And that kind of puts you on a path, whether you buy a winery or you hire an expert or you hire a marketing guy, whatever path you take with the couple pennies in your pocket that's left over from your first year of production kind of sets you on a strategic path. And the whole game is just a fight to stay afloat. You compare that to the new one, and in the new one, it's weird because the money is just as tight. By the 3rd or 4th turn of the new rule set, everybody at the table was just trying to squeeze pennies from a stone so that they could just get, something to improve. So the money's just as tight. But in the new one, you don't have that kind of startup starvation feel because the new version starts you with a mountain of money.
Yeah, we were all swimming in money, and we spent it at least me. I just was throwing money away the first couple turns. And then suddenly I went, this is a problem. And you looked across the table and laughed at me like, yeah, welcome. This
Right.
is how it feels.
Yeah, because that's the game I knew. The game I knew was so tight, money-wise, that you were agonizing over every expenditure. And in that new one, we're all drowning in money at the beginning. So the first couple turns is just this explosion of growth. All of the property has been bought. We've all got these giant farms. We've got 2 wineries and a wine expert and a tour guide in the cellars. We were just like you said, just hemorrhaging money everywhere, and we're okay with it because it was building. And while again the game got to the same place eventually, we eventually got to where we were splitting hairs in the budget trying to make it work. So that feel has been maintained, but the path is completely different. And it's not a path that I particularly like. It didn't feel like we were all taking a different direction because we were all buying all the property, and then we were all building all the buildings we could fit on that property because we had so much money. There was a couple things that happened later with the bonus actions and stuff that let us differentiate a little bit. But that basic growth thing, it was a completely different vibe, and it wasn't an interesting vibe.
The comment that I didn't say at the table, mostly because I knew how much you guys said you love the game and you were looking forward to the new version and everything. And I didn't just immediately want to go, well, that's stupid. Not that it was stupid, but I didn't want to be seen as a downer. But to me, it almost felt like a game where I was just pulling levers to get a result. And a lot of times the levers seem very disconnected in terms of why I would want to pull them. And some of that I know is being the first time that I played the game, because that's the way it always is, right? You pull a lever in turn 1 and the payout's going to be at the end game, and it's hard to know the direct connection between those things and know how much value a first turn action is versus a 5th turn action in terms of what you could have done with that resource during the course of the game. I mean, all that's really incredibly difficult, so I know that's a big part of it, but some of it was, at least to me, some of it seemed like that simplicity. And it seems like that's a bit like what you're saying too, is that when you strip out what you kind of call the rough edges, sometimes the rough edges are character. And when you strip out that character, what you essentially get is just this point generation machine.
Right. And that's, I think the reason you couldn't see the levers was because you had so much money. Right. The big thing about, like, one of the main aspects of Vinhos that makes it such a challenging game is when you step away from it and look at it from a top-down, high-end view of it, you have a game that is 2 to 3 hours long that only gives you 12 single actions. You are only going to do 12 things over the course of this game. And that isn't any different in the new version either. I mean, it's the same. The functionality is the same on 80% of the game. But, you are feeling those 12 actions. They have, you see the weight of them in the original rule set because you don't have that money, right? You start the game and you're like, okay, I have enough money to buy one thing. And you look at your board state and you're like, what can I do to keep this company afloat? And then you go do that, and then you get that kickback. So that lever has a very direct line to your goal because, again, the goal of the old game is almost survival at the beginning.
Yeah.
And when you take out that pressure, I think that generates that effect where you're just like, what lever do I pull and why am I pulling it? Because right now I can do whatever I want. And in the original game, you cannot do whatever you want. You have to address problems. You have to, you've got so little money that you have to make every dollar count. And quite frankly, that was, this is a case of be careful what you wish for me. Because one of my criticisms of Vinhos when I had first played it was that you don't get paid for the stuff you make. When you sell wine, you don't get cash in your pocket. You export wine or you ship it to the bar or whatever. They send your money to your bank account. So it's kind of simulating how this stuff is really done. When Walmart signs a contract to sell 80,000 whatever it is you're selling, they don't cut you a check for $80,000 and hand it to you and then you back a truck up and dump it. You organize all that shipping stuff. It goes out to their stores, and then next quarter a check will arrive at your bank account. And this game simulates that in the very same way. There's no instant gratification. If I sell $800 worth of wine, I don't have $800 to spend now. I have $800 that's going to show up at the bank later that I then have to go get and then take that out to spend. And that is super difficult because all euros, for simplicity's sake, or the vast majority of them, and how the 2016 version of Vinhos works, is you sell that wine and you get that money and you can immediately spend it. It's like immediate gratification. There's no planning needed. In the old game, you had a bank space and all your money went to that bank. And if you needed money for something, you had to take one of those 12 precious actions and waste it going to the bank. You're going there to the bank and you're taking out the money you're going to need. And because, again, 12 actions, and spending an action just to go to the bank is so punishing in the long term, you have to know how much money you're going to need for the next 3 or 4 or 5 turns, because you're not going to have enough time to keep going back to the bank. And this adds just a ton of kind of logistical planning of what you're going to do. Originally, that felt a little too much like work. I felt I couldn't react to things, or that if I misjudged and was $1 short, I lost yet another action having to fix it. Or if I took out too much money, didn't actually use it, didn't need it, I had robbed myself of a bunch of victory points because, again, in the original game, the bank gave you victory points based on how much money you had left in there gathering interest. So taking out too much money was denying yourself victory points. So this is a expert skill level thing, right? That the player who manages that the best is the one who's going to win. And I didn't realize how brilliant that was until I had it taken away from me, as it is in the new version. The new version gave me exactly what I wanted. That wasted bank action was removed. The money is immediate gratification. And when I need money, I can just get it by selling something and then immediately spend it somewhere else. And with that in play, now all of that kind of balance and tension has been stripped away. And I realize now that bank thing was what differentiated the paths the players were on. Being a great money manager would be rewarded, and you didn't have to be great. I mean, you can certainly win by being bad at the bank, but being good at the bank, though, was something that would be rewarded. And just as a personal preference, any game out there, if it rewards different paths, that is something that I find super interesting. Different ways to approach picking up victory points, rewarding different skill sets. If you can reward 6 different skill sets among 4 or 5 people, you're going to have a great game because everybody's going to be involved doing what they do best and having fun with it.
This is tickling a thought that I had when I was thinking about it after the fact, and that is that when you first described the game to me, it was almost like you were describing a game that was about momentum. You have these certain number of actions, and you have so little resource that those actions are so precious, and it's almost like your limited resources is being reinforced in the limited actions, right? It's kind of a self-reinforcing mechanism. Right. And you are building up your little company, and you have all these different avenues to do it. And sometimes you have a year where you don't have any of your good product, but you have to fake it till you make it. You just sell whatever wine you have underneath your label and hope that no one notices. And there's all these really cool things that happen when you're directly involved in a business and you're having to solve those problems. And to me, that's what the game was. Like, I'm just like you said, I'm this subsistence winery and I want to try to make $1 and I want to prove that I can do this. How do I go about doing it? And at the end of the game, we simply look and say, who has the best trajectory? Whereas the version we played, I felt very disconnected from my board that represented my holdings. And instead, to me, it almost felt like I was some international marketing agency, and I had a 2-year contract to help this winery, and I wanted to make that winery as profitable as I could at the end of the contract, and then after that, I didn't care what happened to it. Because we started with this huge wad of money, and just like you said, we could sell this thing, get that money, immediately flip it over and buy this other thing, and just be churning this little engine into points. And pretty much all of us, like, I think one player bucked the trend a little bit simply because of some of the scoring tiles he had at the end of the game, but pretty much everyone completely emptied their board on the last turn. Like, there was nothing left. All of our businesses, all of our holdings, everything was completely liquidated. And that felt a little bit odd to me. It actually, like, from a gameplay standpoint, it felt like the difference between Agricola versus At the Gates of Loyang. Because Agric, right, you're building this huge engine, and at the end of the game, everyone just goes, oh, I just want one more turn, because this next turn would just be ridiculous, and all these points would come flowing in, because it's a game about building up, right? Whereas Loyang is a game about clearing your market stall. And at the end of the game, you look at yourself as a hero if you have no resources left that can be utilized. And so the game has this really kind of up-down arc, whereas Agric has this just upward arc. And I was looking for Vinhos to have that, just, that snowball effect where everything was getting bigger. And on that last turn, we all look around and go, our little engines are fundamentally different than what we started with. And instead, we finished the game and I looked down and I just went, well, that's the end of that. Because even though the engine looked a little bit different, there was nothing left. All the fuel was gone and everything was just completely spent. And I'm not saying that is a bad game. It just, to me, there was a bit of a disconnect there with what the game kind of felt like we were trying to do.
Yeah, and it's a different ending than you had sort of been promised by me talking about it before it had arrived, right?
Well, it's not even what you promised. The game gives you these tools that are there to build up this engine, to build up this company. And then the game makes you cash everything out. Or at least it seems the game benefits you when you cash everything out like that. Yeah. Which seemed like it was kind of cutting across its own wake a little bit.
Yeah, and it does. And again, that is a function of the new rule set. To kind of, another place where a lot, I think, was lost was the wine fairs. Because in the old game, the wine fairs were kind of a persistent thing. There was this very real sense of your brand, or just a real sense of branding. Really, you could, part of that whole, scraping your pennies and where do I put these? Part of that could be in advertising, because essentially what you were doing is hiring wine experts to kind of go to the wine fair and be tastemakers. And that in the old game was a big investment because the money was so tight. Again, in the new one, the experts cost $1, and $1 is meaningless because you have $100. In the old game, you have $6, and hiring 2 people to advertise your product means you're not putting in that new winery on that property you just bought. So it's a super tight decision. However, the experts, when you do hire them, their kind of influence in the wine fairs is perpetual. It has that feel of advertising and branding, because you are going to kind of steer the tastes of the crowd, and any work you do to push, to make them prefer clarity and nose over taste and alcohol content, that those moves are perpetual. You push them up on turn 1, and on turn 5, nose is still the most important part of the wine. So you can invest in that, and then you can kind of steer your company to do, because you decided to make that the most important thing, it's obviously something that your winery is already doing well. So there's a real feel of control and market manipulation of the wine fair through this kind of abstracted advertising that's in the game. And in the new version, that wine fair, while strangely like the money, it works the same in the end. Like the stresses feel the same. Functionally, the wine fair is doing the same thing as part of the game. However, the disconnect shows its face again, because in the new game, you are reacting to the market. Mm-hmm. You aren't controlling the market. And, when you're dealing with luxury items like wine, I think market control is a huge influence. They call them tastemakers for a reason, right? These people, they kind of artificially influence what is important. And then the companies follow suit by producing that thing that is now important, and that's a big part of all business, of all commercial businesses. But it's super important when you're talking luxury items. So, the old game, because you could kind of hire someone to kind of move the bar a little, and then that bar would stay where it's at. And your competitors now, they either had to push their own agendas, or they have to conform to what you're doing. And since you're already there, you've squeaked a little bit of an advantage. And by taking that out of the game now and have it be a reactionary thing, because the way it works now, instead of you controlling kind of, and competing for what's important in your wines for the consumer, now there's kind of like a random tile that flips up that says the customer base just wants this thing. And if you can match advertisers to what they kind of already want, you'll score a bunch of points. And that's reactionary. It's a little bit kind of lucky, I guess. And the fact that you can just, again, the money issue, because you can just buy what you need when you need it. Like you flip the tile, like, oh, red's in demand, I'll just go buy a bunch of red guys. That feeling of, again, investment and kind of trying to manipulate the environment for your business to do well, that's completely gone. And again, that's a huge piece of the character of that game that it really, really hurts to see it taken out, even though it's made the game simpler.
Well, it just like you said, by it being a reactionary thing, it takes that decision from a decision that you have an investment in, and not just in terms of your sort of identity looking at your board, but you have investment because you're going to see it come up again and again and again. By just making it this one note, one turn opportunism,
right?
It makes that a tactical decision.
It's tactical. It's completely tactical. Yeah, that's a big difference.
It changes my interaction with the game, where instead of feeling like a craftsman, an artisan who's making this thing and cares about its identity, I'm just sitting in in an office somewhere, and I get an email that says, hey, there's going to be this thing. Do you want to be first to market? And I click yes. For us, when we played the game, that was always the big benefit. Who was going to be the first to market in terms of doing a press release for a wine fair? That was it.
Right.
And that exact situation is the difference between being the one whose identity is wrapped up in the product versus being the one whose job is to sell the product.
Yeah.
The whole game is this product identity generating machine, but then there's big points in just selling it, which just seems disingenuous almost to me. Some of that's just me kind of getting wrapped up in the touchstone of the theme.
But I don't think you're wrong in that. Like, I think that is the exact criticism I have. This game that was so steeped in that theme and so steeped in that like wine culture, the social commentary of it, taking that out of the game takes away what was so special about it and what made you kind of think so critically to laugh about it and to understand it, and understand how it works in other venues, almost as an educational tool. Like that has been stripped out of the game. You know, another place it happens, not to belabor the point, but is the judges, the wine judges. It's a fairly minor thing in the new rules. You know, when I said earlier that you only get 12 actions, to clarify, you only get 12 guaranteed actions, because if you have influence with the right people, you can take these kind of bonus actions that you can tack onto the front or back of your regular actions. And if you do that, you can start taking 4 actions a turn, and you can push that up to where you're taking like 24 actions a turn. But that is not easy to do, especially in the old game. You have to, and this is again more social commentary, you have to produce enough wine. You know, you have to produce some to sell to be profitable. You have to make a special reserve to send to the wine fair, because once you send that, score really well at the wine fair with your special reserve, your name is now worth something. And you can take your name and then you can slap it on some swill. And then you can sell that. You don't even sell it. You just kind of supply that to these wine judges who have their own kind of industries going on in the background. Not openly stated, but we know that's how it works, right? And you basically take these cheap wines that you've made because you had a bad year, or as you were talking about, you know, you just had a bad run, but you still need to sell it somewhere. So you can put your name on it and kind of put it off here and just kind of coast on your name, not the quality of the wine. In the old game, what you did with those wines was you sent them to the judges. Thematically, it's their shop or their bar or whatever it is they do to qualify them to be a wine judge. You are now supplying them with your big name house wine. And the benefit they give you is now you start getting to take extra actions. Again, presumably you have made some kind of backroom deal, and now you have more people, whether it's distribution or whatever the abstractness is. You have actions that are being taken in addition to the actions that you are doing that are helping your company as a whole. And again, that again pulls that theme in and makes it feel like you're running a multi-dimensional business. You have all of these balls to keep in the air, and wisely investing in this or that is what makes your company successful. And a lot of times the contacts are as important as the business deals. And the old game did that. The new one, again, has gone completely tactical. And you were just kind of scooping those bonus actions up at will.
Yeah.
And it again, a big piece of the puzzle has been lost. When it's all said and done, the old version provided such a better experience of building a business from the ground up. It hits on all of the important things in general, and also specifically in doing it as a wine business. All of that stuff is really satisfying and makes it feel like you're playing make believe as the owner of a vineyard, which I think, you know, all the good games really do let you play make believe. You know, whether you're trying to be a railroad tycoon or, whatever the game is, I think in a sense, a lot of it is make believe. And if a game lets you kind of feel you're doing that job, then the game is doing it successfully. The old version of Vinhos did exactly that, whereas the new version of Vinhos feels like pulling levers and scoring points. I am almost positive I'm going to go back to the old rules.
Really?
I do want to play specifically with you so you can see if it makes a difference for you, because, you know, I think it will. And I think the most interesting part of this game to you was social commentary, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Kind of the parts of it that are a little bit silly when you step back and look at it, but they're an intrinsic part of it, and they are what makes the industry move, right? So I think if you get to experience that version of Vinhos, it might change your mind a little bit.
It seems silly at times to sit down and play. And I'm not talking like play as in like enact in the play experience, but to play act, to pretend to be a railroad tycoon or whatever. It seems silly, but the thing that makes it fun to me is when a game presents enough of that world that you can understand some of the tongue-in-cheek. Let's back up. You know that you're actually part of an operation. You're part of an industry. You're part of a venture, and not even a venture. You're part of a trade, right? When you can look around, instead of just seeing the little one paragraph Wikipedia explanation of what you do here, you can look around and you can see how ridiculous it all is. And I think that that's what's really cool about a game, when it gets enough of the experience in it that you can look around and go, wow, this is kind of silly. And then you go out into the world and you look around. Let's say you're at the store and you flip over a bottle of wine and you read the little brief on the back about what you're supposed to taste when you sample it, and you just laugh and go, there's no way. No, like, there's no way that I'm going to, taste the morning sprung kiss of a lamb on a Scottish meadow. That no, I'm sorry. That, and you can see through it. I think that stuff is really not only enjoyable, when it happens and you kind of see the product of it, but I think that's what makes play worth doing as an adult, right? Because as a young person, you play to sort of experience the world and expand your knowledge of the world. And as an adult, I think it's the same thing. We just have to, like, our world's already so big that we kind of have to push it into other avenues. And I think that games let us do that when they let us jump into something and kind of look around and understand why stuff ticks. And that's one of the big importances of simulation in games. I mean, most of these games are built upon abstraction, where you take a concept and you boil it down, and that's good and it's necessary. However, if you just have a game that's purely abstract, then you basically have any number of abstracts. And while those are fun and enjoyable, I love them, the exercise that you go through in an abstract game is fundamentally different than the experience and the benefit that you get from a game that has a lot of simulation. This is a big discussion with war games, right? That fine balance in between enough simulation to where you feel like you have the right tactical opportunities and involvement and investment and experience, the tension, right? Versus the abstraction that makes you not have to roll 100 missile hits from an MRM 100 in Battletech, right? It's finding that balance. When I sat down and played the Gallerist, which is kind of the sister game to Vinhos, I was coming out of my seat. Like, I remember stopping the game a couple times and, like, having to almost, like, give a little seminar to everybody about how amazing this game was at showing non-artists what it's like to be a professional artist. How you are totally wrapped up in your craft and your product and everything, but that's not what makes you your money. It's your name. And your name is just a commodity, and it's actually not even attached to you. And yeah. And in that game, we were playing these soulless marketing agencies who just, I mean, like, even in the way that you get artists, you go to the flea market and you just recruit one, right? And when you bring them back to your corral, you just pick up artwork and have them sign it. Like, it doesn't even matter if it's their artwork or not. And everything about that game is all of the soulless parts of using someone's art and craft and passion as a money-making commodity. And it's brilliant. And as someone who's been on that sled dog hooked up to someone else's sled part of it, right, I still had a blast. Like, I had a blast being the enemy because it did it so well that I could look around and laugh. And it was beautiful. And even now, when I have talks with friends that are still pursuing gallery shows and that kind of stuff, there's this weird part of me that just makes me chuckle and go, you realize what's happening here. It was awesome. And it gave me an investment in that game that was bigger than just the mechanics of the game. And that game has some clunky parts too. I mean, we talked about it. There's some really unintuitive components. However, once you dunk your head in the apple barrel of the theme and of the simulation part of it, the abstractions that seem clunky as abstractions, you see the parts of the abstraction that are tuned to be simulation, right? And you forgive them. And it's like those rough edges that you talked about. Like, those rough edges are the character. They're why you're there and enjoying the thing. that's exactly what I was looking for in Vinhos. Like, I was looking to get the opportunity to be an artisan, be a craftsman, be a little mom and pop shop and struggle, and to be punching upward, to be fighting against this need to employ these tastemakers, right? And to sort of flirt with the devil in order to get my product out there and make it marketable, but still have the burden and all of the trials and the limitations that come with actually caring about what's in front of me on my board as my product. And all of that was gone. And I kind of felt like I missed out.
You just hung out like so many threads there that I just want to grab and swing on. No, it was a brilliant observations. You know, I had kind of linked Vinhos and the Gallerist both as being kind of love letters and social commentary criticisms on the culture for both games. I mean, that's definitely a common theme, but I kind of left it at that. I hadn't really picked up on the fact that you were actually kind of playing the same game, but from two different seats. Mm-hmm. You know, whereas in Vinhos, as you said, you know, you're the artist, or I should say artisan, that is, you know, crafting this wine that you want to, you're proud of, and you want to share it. And to get it out there, you have to go spend what, you know, little resources you already don't have. And you have to give them to these monsters, these self-serving, out for profit. They don't give a crap about your business. But you have to go, like you said, dance with that devil if you want to be successful. I hadn't really kind of realized till you said it, that in the Gallerist, you were playing that exact same game, except instead of being the starving artist who has to dance with the devil, you're the devil. And, you know, and putting yourself into those shoes, again, realize that there's nothing devilish about it. It's just, that's their job, and that's how they have to do it. And the Gallerist presents you with the problems and the hurdles and the issues that guy has to take on in order to kind of grease these wheels so that the art gets out to the world. I just never put that together, that I was playing the same game just from the other team, the other team side of the ball.
I think it's built into the fabric of the game. I mean, for example, in the Gallerist, right? Let's back up. They're both worker placements on a fundamental level, right? But in the Gallerist, you have yourself, and then you can hire all these proxy workers to do the work, because ultimately it's just making phone calls. It's just making contacts. It's just showing up and doing this stuff. Whereas in Vinhos, you have one worker. You have one action. And that's the way it is as an artisan and a craftsman, is that you can't get anyone to do your special work. So even down to just the core of the way that they interact with the mechanisms of the game, one is built top down, and then the other one, it's built bottom up, where your commodity is what you produce, not necessarily your actions, right? I think that's why the version of Vinhos that we played felt, I don't want to say soulless, because it makes it sound like I'm taking some sort of a stance that I'm not taking, but it didn't have that character, right? It didn't have that little twinge that sort of made you feel like you were getting to pretend, and that you were benefiting from that pretend, because it almost felt like the mechanics were disingenuine to the theme. And I think that it would take a while, but I think you could actually unpack it. I mean, because the Gallerist, every fiber of what you do, every fiber of how you interact with that game is built around sitting in an office and making phone calls, making 1-minute phone calls to people that you don't care about.
Right.
And in Vinhos, everything you do matters. Every action you do is so important because you're so limited. Time is your commodity. And when you're the guy who's just making one phone call after another, time isn't your commodity, it's your contacts. Just that one little twist, it took it from being an experience that I mean, like when we played the Gallerist, I came home and talked about it for hours, about just how beautiful. Like I'm not even bitter about seeing, how how the devil does his business when it comes to artists. Like, I'm not bitter at all. It's beautiful to see it because it's educational, and it's not even educational. It's just it's enlightening because it's two sides of the same coin. With Vinhos, my response was, yeah, I mean, it's a solid little game.
Yeah.
That was a bummer. I mean, it's a great Euro. It functions wonderfully as a Euro. But, I mean, Lost Cities functions wonderfully as Rummy, you know?
Yeah.
But where's the theme? Like, there's a disconnect. And while Vinhos was a good game, and it functioned admirably, what made Gallerist a great game was because it was a great experience. And I think that there are two gears that sort of have to lock there in order to make me crave sitting down and playing a game like that again. We've brought this up with Millennium Blades before when we've explained it to other people, that on the outset, the actual dual card game of Millennium Blades, it's interesting. It's pretty simple. I mean, if you want to sit down and play a head-to-head CCG, go pick up Doomtown or, you know, Warcraft or something like that, right? I mean, those are going to be better games functionally. However, Millennium Blades is an experience that I crave because there's so much packed into that. I hate to say experience again, but it's almost like a framework, right? That in addition to a functional game that you have problem solving that's entertaining and tickles your brain in stimulating ways, you're getting to sort of look at yourself and laugh at yourself and understand more about being a gamer. And to me, it's so beneficial. And that's part of the purpose of play. If the only reason that we're playing games is just to check them off our list, why are we doing it? Like, there has to be a benefit. And the benefit isn't just tickling our brains so we don't get Alzheimer's when we're older, right? Let's just go play Sudoku if that's what it's about. Like, there has to be something that's helping us grow and develop. That's the purpose of play. And I think that to a certain degree, that is one of the unspoken importances of theme and the interaction of theme with mechanics through that balance of simulation and abstraction. And it's a really complicated topic, but I think that the Gallerist just knocked it out of the park. And the version of Vinhos that we played missed it by an inch, but that inch was paramount. And that's why it kind of becomes a good example of the ways to do and not to do. And I can't wait to sit down and play with the old rule set, because if that one little switch being thrown of changing when you get the money and changing the way that the wine fairs work, if that one little just sort of tweak, or I guess it's two tweaks, changes the game and turns it back into this play for growth instead of play for mechanism, that's going to be profound. And someone should write a PhD dissertation on it.
I really look forward to you playing the old one, because I think if we were to revisit it after you play the old one, assuming the first impressions didn't sour it for you, because that happens, unfortunately. But I think you're talking and thinking through it enough that it won't be an issue. But I think once you experience the original Vinhos in its original form, you will have those same feelings that you are expounding on about the Gallerist. You're going to have that exact same feeling about Vinhos. All those things we talked about, it's doing. All the simulationist parts of it are intact, and they're important. Man, not to take it back too far to what you said earlier, but as far as how you said, you know, I thought it was a really good take. In Vinhos, you're the artisan. Your time is valuable, and it takes so much energy to make that product that it is so hard to do all the other things to making that product a viable business. Whereas in the Gallerist, as you said, 1-minute phone calls is your day. Just making contacts and talking to 100 different people and kind of letting that work take care of itself. You're just the contact man making it happen. You've put a spotlight on another little piece of brilliance in both of these games. You know, speaking of Vinhos, the old rules, and the Gallerist, in that I think that stuff is represented in both those games, because when you look at Vinhos, time is your most important commodity, because, again, 12 actions. Like, I only get to do 12 things this entire game. I have to make them count. And then on top of that, because those 12 actions are so important, the game moves like a glacier. And I don't, it's not in a bad way. Like, everyone's involved. It's not a boring slow. It's just because you need to know exactly how much money you're going to need. You're going to need to know exactly what you need to do to keep the business afloat. The turns are very, very methodical and thinky. And then you look at the Gallerist, and it very much is 1 minute phone calls. Turns are just bam, 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 super breezy. When the Gallerist came out, the designer, Vital Lacerda, he said this game is lighter. It's brisker. It's strategically deep, but it feels light because the turns are very, very quick and very, very brisk, and they are. With that analysis you just gave, that just puts another feather in the cap of how brilliant both of those games are at representing those industries. We'll get up another day set up with the old rules, and we'll play it again. And I think if we muscle through it and you get to do that, it'll alleviate a lot of the concerns you had or a lot of the disappointment you had with Vinhos as a game. So yeah, let's make that happen.
I really want to do it. And
sorry, I boomed. Yeah,
no, it's okay.
That felt like a good way to tie it up.
Cool.